Hi, good evening, everybody. Back from a much-needed break. I don't know how many of you were around on Monday, but I was kind of burned out. I had so many things on my plate here, and figured I might as well just go ahead and take several days off. So here we are on Friday, and let's check out the charts here. Had some weather down in Louisiana this morning. You might remember, those of you tracking weather last night, we had a little line of thunderstorms move through Texas last night, and that made it into Louisiana during the morning hours. And here's a quick look at what that storm looked like. Let me zoom out a little bit. And that's on the leading edge of a front that stretched from northeast to southwest, and we had cold air coming in behind that, and because of the presence of the cold air, we had strong upper-level winds to help augment the storm severity there. So let's check out this area here. Well, it's about 8 in the morning, 8 or 9. Doesn't look all that bad at first glance. There's a little bit of discreteness to the cells, like they're kind of grouped into little clusters like that. But if we roll this forward, let's see if we notice a change take hold here. Okay, so we've got this storm here on the south side starting to increase a little bit in severity, and you'll notice it's slightly ahead of the line. So this is a good candidate for becoming severe. It's got good access to storm inflow, and we're seeing a little bit of higher reflectivities on the south side rather than having those reflectivities near the center like you see with that cell right there. So now we're seeing a little bit of a hook shape there, a little bit of a notch. That would be the inflow and the updraft base on that storm. And there we go, tornado warning. And fortunately, we didn't have any significant damage or deaths. There was one injury associated with the storm. Let's roll this back and take a look at the velocity and see if we can see when some of these factors started appearing. Okay, starting out very early on, we've got range folding, and that's always a big annoyance when you start getting out to these further distances from the radar. So the storm is kind of emerging from that area, and we're watching this region right here. Doesn't look like anything too that would really concern us. Base velocity is showing mostly flow toward the radar. If we subtract out the storm motion, we can kind of group that into storm relative flow this way and storm relative flow the other way. So it looks like we've got this little cluster here of strong inflow. Okay, so we move along. Now we're seeing something come together right there. That storm inflow right here is now kind of forming a bit of a rotational signature. So here we have flow toward the radar, here flow away. So we've got rotation right there. And the higher velocities are kind of touching each other right there. Let me zoom in real quick. We've got 10 out and 21 in. That's not very strong. That's about 30 knots of gate-to-gate shear, but that is something you would watch. And let me put that dot there. You can see where that is relative to the storm. So you might be a little bit concerned when you see that. But you would also go up to higher levels and see what's going on there. Nothing that concerns me too much. Reflectivity signatures aloft, 0.8, 1.2. Well, this would probably concern me a little bit. Some higher velocities aloft. Or, I'm sorry, higher reflectivities. So this is up at about 20,000 feet. We're seeing about 54 dBz's. So this could be the start of some overhang. Yeah, see that purple right there? 61 dBz's. And we go down lower, and we don't have those strong reflectivities. So that is a little bit of what I would call overhang. So let's roll that forward. So now we're seeing the velocity start to increase here near White Castle. We have 11 out and 37 in. Let me adjust the storm motion a little bit. 22 out, 28 in. Okay, that's better. So we're getting about 40 to 50 knots of shear right there. And you can see that that's out in this notch area, this area where we have an updraft. So if you had spotters, you'd probably have them positioned along this road right here, maybe looking towards there. And I think at this time we might be looking at maybe a wall cloud or a brief tornado. Then we roll that forward. We see the velocity start to increase even more. We've got about 24 knots out and about 25 in. That's about 50 to 60 knots. So this is definitely not like Oklahoma, El Reno type rotation, but it is still something that you would have to keep an eye on. And we see some very tight velocities go right over White Castle. And you can see that the motion on this is about 100. You would keep close tabs on the heading of that motion, and that lets you kind of project it forward. And you can use that with the direction readout down at the bottom. So that's actually a very powerful forecasting tool right there. You put the dot right there, bring the cursor out, make sure you're at about 100, and that gives you your projected location. Okay, so that's this morning's cells right there in Louisiana. Definitely very HP-ish, but that's pretty typical of what we have there in Louisiana. Okay, let's get caught up on the weather. There's the storm reports from this morning showing 3 tornadoes down in the New Orleans to Slidell to Baton Rouge area. And let's see here. Let's check out the winds aloft. Well, last time we talked, that was back on Sunday, we had a very meridional pattern, meaning that the waves aloft had a lot of amplitude. So we're continuing to see that. And we've got the polar front jet well up in the northwest U.S. We have another segment down in Texas and Arkansas. And then part of that is stretching out to Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Ohio. And we have what looks like maybe a subtropical jet well to the south. So if we have any storm activity down in Florida or along the Gulf Coast, that subtropical jet would help organize those storms and allow some of them to become severe. So a lot of times your severe weather is kind of paired up with a polar front jet, but when you have the subtropical jet in the mix, that kind of extends your area even further south. 500 millibar, 18,000 foot winds showing the upper level low this morning over the Fort Smith area. at 700 millibars. That's stacked down into the Fort Smith area, pretty much vertical. So we know we've got a barotropic low there. Certainly an occluded low located right there. So that probably pulled out during the day, went across the Ozarks, and I would expect this evening to find that maybe just north of Memphis or out in that area there. Since it's been a while, we might as well look at the hemispheric chart. We haven't looked at this in a while. And this kind of tells us what we might see further upstream. We see a very large upper level low over the Pacific Northwest. This is our British Columbia here, Washington, Oregon, and California. And we've got kind of a zonal flow out over the Pacific. Maybe a couple of waves moving through the flow right there, and the next large wave off the Siberian coast there. Okay, so I'll probably be watching that to be the next system to affect the Central Plains, and might see that after the weekend. Okay, let's take a look at the satellite. This is the visible satellite imagery, and we're seeing a lot of the cold core convection over Arkansas. So remember we had this morning vertically stacked low over the Fort Smith area, and that moved eastward. And this whole area over Arkansas and parts of Mississippi, very steep lapse rates in that area. Because basically that's a large cold pool aloft up at about 20 to 30,000 feet. So we get a cold, overwarm situation, and that gives us a very ripe situation for cumulonimbus and thunderstorms and showers. And then the main frontal area, that's going to be further down in Alabama, Georgia, and Florida. Because this whole area here, this is your warm, moist air mass. And the occlusion out over Arkansas, that's cut off from that moist, warm air. So the basic situation we're looking at is something like this. So, occlusion over Arkansas, main baroclinic region over maybe northern Alabama, northern Georgia, maybe in the Knoxville area. And then we would expect to find a warm front extending west or east from that, and then a cold front south from that. And indeed, we do have what looks like a squall line over that area. Another way we can look at all that is to look at the polar orbiter data. This is the NASA Worldview page, and this is how you get to that. It's going to be worldview.earthdata.nasa.gov. And they've got some very neat polar orbiter data. We've got Aqua, Terra, and the Suomi satellite right there. So we can zoom in and take a look at what the system looked like, and usually these passes are in the middle of the day to early afternoon. It definitely looks like a cold core type appearance. We can zoom in. And these polar orbiters have quarter-kilometer resolution, which is twice as good as the new GOES 16 satellites. So this is actually very good. The problem is we don't have hourly coverage. We get like one snapshot around midday, and that's it. But definitely looks like a mess here. A lot of cold core convection. This is the Aqua satellite taken a little bit afterwards, maybe about an hour or two later, and you can see things are very vertical, lots of anvils. And here's your state lines. There's the western Arkansas state line. Here's Texas, and that's Texarkana right there. So quite a stormy day in Arkansas. Not much severe weather, but definitely a lot of photogenic supercells. And then here's Mississippi. Just countless cumulonimbus and CB clouds. And then we get down to the squall line itself along the cold front. And there's some of those cells right there along that cold front. And there's the moisture out ahead of it. So sometimes this is kind of fun to just look at and just kind of tour around parts of the world and see what kind of weather's going on. Like here in northeast Mexico, you can see a little bit of damming of cold air out in this region right here. It's kind of like what happens in the Appalachians sometimes. And this is the higher terrain here. So we get a little bit of orographic lift, which is south of Monterey out in that area. And we get a pretty ripe situation for convective development right there. Okay, here's our model data. And you can see that the frontal system out over the southeast U.S. is very weak. So we can barely pick up that occlusion. And I guess the cold front is something like this right there. It looks like the warm front actually shows up a lot better. And we can see that in North Carolina from about Wilmington. And then across northern South Carolina here. And then the cold front very weak out into the Gulf of Mexico. Then back behind it, high pressure moving in across the Midwest. So a very nice day there in the Central Plains. And then out to the northwest, here comes our next frontal system. So it looks like that's sweeping through South California and through northern Utah. And definitely through Montana here. And then we pick up the warm front just like that. And then here's our cold pool. It's pretty close to where we're going to find the occlusion. And then in between that, looks like we have a little bit of a anafront. Very typical for that part of the country. Okay, then as far as the upper level patterns, you can see the very tight packing of thickness. And that kind of clues us in where our jet stream is, and that's going to follow that thickness packing very closely. So kind of like what I drew right here. And you can see that thickness line, these thickness bands, they go right over that high pressure area in the central U.S. And that's indicating that that high right there is a baroclinic high. In other words, it's a polar front high. And that's quite a bit different from the Bermuda high, which we find out here in the summertime. And that's more of a barotropic system. So in the same respect, out here in the Pacific, we can see bands of thickness going through this high pressure area. So we've probably got a little bit of baroclinicity in this high right here. So this is a bit of a polar front high nosing into the west coast area. Okay, let's see here. Let's take a quick look at a sounding, and I think maybe this is a good time to take a look at cold core soundings. So I'm going to pick out Little Rock for this morning. And we see a little bit of moisture there in the low levels. Looks like the main cold pool is not over the Little Rock area at that time. We'll bring up Springfield. Not much of a cold pool either. And I think what we're actually seeing here is the fact that the system is pretty weak. We don't have a strong cold pool like we do out over the Pacific Northwest. But we've got just enough, just barely enough instability to get that afternoon activity going. Okay, let's see. What do we have next in our product line? I guess we'll take a look at the dynamics. Okay, so this is going to be the 500 millibar heights and vorticity. And this is showing a little bit of that cold pool there over Arkansas, maybe a little bit stronger in the mid-levels. Seems to be very localized as far as where that cold air is. But going over Little Rock right now. And then you can see the main waves aloft. Those are focused on the Alabama area and down along the Gulf Coast right there. So over the next few days, we're going to see the remainder of that cold air aloft move into the southeast U.S., ridging moving over the central U.S., and then by Sunday and Monday, jet stream activity, jet stream in place over the southwest U.S. into the northern plains, and we'll start picking up a little bit of flow in the northern plains, and that may allow for a few severe storms up in that area. So we're talking about Sunday or Monday. So maybe here in Colorado, maybe a little bit of something going on Sunday or Monday. Really depends how much return flow we have. And it looks like it's going to be a slow process, and I think by Tuesday here, things are starting to look more like what we would expect on a severe weather day. So it looks like 2 or 3 days of a break, and then we've got our next big wave moving into Arizona and Utah. Flow picking up in this area, and probably we're going to see the dry line establish itself in the Panhandle. And we might start seeing the very first severe storms get going there. And usually your best activity is going to be a day or two before the main wave emerges out into the plains. So this here may be actually a very good chase day. Depends how much moisture makes it up into that area. So we're talking Tuesday of next week for this frame right here. Okay, so I think we're about ready to head into the forecast. Let me get that lined up right there and take a quick look at the chat. Okay, joining us this evening, we've got Michael Burrell, first one on, Megan John, and Ahmed from Saudi Arabia. Ryan Toomey's says good evening on this surprise Friday. Kevin McKinney is here, Justin Polium, Calio Delphi. Jeremy Dawson, excited to see us back online. Trevor Parker. And Ryan says he sent an email link from South Florida. So it looks like a meeting coming up with the hurricane hunters. Cayo Delphi worried about our sudden disappearance, but yeah, that's right. Things were quite busy, and I was pretty burned out earlier this week. Eddie W., glad to see chat back. Melody Loves Jesus, talking about the storms there in Louisiana. Kingfisher, Oklahoma, had baseball and softball-sized hail Thursday afternoon. So Ryan was seeing that on the feeds there. We have storms. That looks like a new name there. Can't wait for the pattern change next week. Ryan mentioning the 60,000-foot storm tops in northeast Oklahoma. And Cayo talking about the Bear Clinic region around Tennessee. And Funwood Tech just joined us there. Okay, so let's head into the forecast. By tomorrow evening, High pressure over the central Mississippi River Valley. So we're going to start seeing a little bit of the return flow getting established across West Texas. There it is right there. Looks like we got a low up to the north. This looks like a baroclinic system. Warm front up in North Dakota. And then a bit of a cold front extending down into the Rockies. So that's our next system coming in. And looks like some very cool air aloft over Washington and Oregon. Okay, bringing this forward into Sunday. Looks like we've got some cyclogenesis there in Nevada, so frontal system becoming reestablished in that area. So I think our frontal positions are going to look something like that right there. Looks like maybe a little bit of baroclinicity right there in eastern Colorado, but we're missing the moisture. Might get a few high base storms in this area right here between Cheyenne and Denver, but a little more moisture would definitely help. Okay, then for Monday, we start to see things become a little bit more spring-like. Cold front coming in from the Great Basin area, and it looks like it's finally making some progress into Colorado and New Mexico. And then Tuesday, that could definitely be a chase day right there. We see storms developing there on the models in the Eastern Panhandle and the Woodward area. So I would definitely plan to be out chasing on this day if I was chasing, and I'm kind of retired from that right now, and I'm a little bit too far south for that, but fortunately, due to the miracle of the internet, I can watch that from here at my place. Okay, then for Wednesday, looks like the dry line is still active, and I think maybe the position of it is kind of like that. There's our frontal system still in the Rockies right there, and part of it going there through Minnesota and Wisconsin. So it looks like another storm day there. And then for Thursday, things get a lot more active. And this looks like another dry line day. Dry line probably something like that. I think we're going to have a warm front up in Nebraska like that, so probably some storms up in that area. But a good chance of outflow boundaries in Oklahoma and Kansas. And when we have outflow boundaries out in the Great Plains like that, we have to kind of keep our eyes out for tornadic storms, because they really feed off the thermal contrasts along those outflow boundaries. Okay, so definitely an active weather day on Thursday. Then for Friday, things move east a little bit. Looks like east of I-35. Another storm day right there, and this looks to be a dry line day. You can see the stronger temperature contrasts are up in this area right there. So whatever's triggering this stuff here in Oklahoma and North Texas and Missouri, that's going to be due to dry lines and outflow boundaries. Okay, so there's where our fronts are located. Okay, then for Saturday, I'm seeing a lot less dark green and yellow, so looks like things might have shut down a little bit, maybe a little bit of capping moving in. So there's the locations of our fronts right there. Warm front up in the Great Lakes. You can see our moisture feed heading up into Illinois and Indiana there. So maybe a little bit of a chance of severe up in that area. And I think the fact that the moisture feed is way out here may be the reason we're not seeing much going on there in Arkansas, in Texas. Okay, then for Sunday, things move eastward. Things look a lot less baroclinic in this area. Just kind of a east-west front through this region right here. Looks like the dry line is active. And then just very quickly going through next week, Monday and Tuesday. Looks like another frontal system going through Texas. And then looks like another warm front right there on Sunday the 28th. I guess that's Memorial Day weekend. And that brings us to the end of the run right there. So looks like gradually we'll start to get into more of a typical springtime pattern and finally get rid of this Hudson Bay vortex. Okay. I think that's probably going to do it for me. I appreciate you all watching, and hopefully we'll see you all tomorrow. Take care.